all of his colleagues in the Florida system. So probably looking at a lot of the same issues and questions as we move into further into the 21st century. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to describe a current project I'm working on right now, and use that as a way to talk about my career more broadly, what my ambitions and hopes are, and so forth. And we've talked about it a little bit, some of you are already here for the conversation portion. And of course, I'm at the end game of my career, and probably going to retire at the end of this year. I mean, I'm 70 years old. I've been teaching at the University of Florida since 1972. And, unfortunately, I'm still pretty perplexed about how things work. So I'll share that a little. And I'm showing this image here. It might be good if we could maybe not have those right on the screen, do you think? Is that I don't know. But I'm looking at this image. Actually, I was just in Boston not too long ago, and I was in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, a terrific museum that I was going. I hadn't realized that Boston had bought this image. This is Gauguin's painting, and you can see the title there, but where do we come from, what are we, where are we going? And I was rolling in this room, and I walked in the room, and there it was. I mean, this is a knockout of the painting. It's wall size, mural size. You've probably seen it before and all, but and the questions there, Gauguin painted this late in his career. He was in Tahiti, 1897, something like that. He was ill. He was in despair. In fact, after he painted this, he attempted to commit suicide. And the questions come from, he actually learned as a catechism as a kid, he learned these questions. So he put those questions on there. And when you look at this, you see it's sort of an allegory in a way that moves from birth to death and whatever. But it reminded me of the three questions that Kant, philosopher Kant, who's sort of philosopher that stands at the beginning of what I call electricity, the apparatus is emerging out of literacy. And Kant had asked, what can I know? What should I do? And what may I hope? And he was thinking about already his three critiques. The limits of knowledge, pure reason, practical reason, and then the judgment of taste. And those are really, at the end of my career, I think, well, these are pretty good questions. I still have these questions. And so I'm going to describe a work that I think maybe now, even though it's a collaborative work down at the Florida Research Ensemble. It's called Murphy's Wellbeing. I think it was maybe, this is my Wentz, Wither work. Although I don't feel suicidal at all or whatever. It's kind of like your problem. Like, I'm perplexed and like, this is a mess. And here's my testimony, and you're going to have to take over and go from there. So the work begins with a situation. I'm in a situation. You're in a situation. We together are in a situation. And I want to use that word situation. As we know, it's an ordinary everyday life term, but it also is a term as a philosophical significance. And it's an existentialist term, and I think, it happens to be given that when I born and raised, growing up in the 50s, and the first philosophers that I read in college were existentialists. So I think I'm sort of just an existentialist by dented generation or something. But remember that Sartre defined the situation as being a circumstance and an intention. So you're in a circumstance and you have an intention towards that circumstance. It becomes a situation, becomes a project in that way. And that term is very influential. Situationists picked up on Sartre's existential idea of situation, took it up in psychogeography. So the situation specifically, and I think this is a way to kind of get a grasp on a certain kind of dimension of discourse that we need to learn, to receive, learn to be the rhetoricians of it. and it is the writing of the disaster. Maurice Blanchot, I'm a big Francophile. I don't know where that came from, but so Blanchot wrote this wonderful book, Writing of the Disaster. And writing of the disaster, listen to that, because what he means is that the disaster is writing to us. The disaster is speaking, communicating something from a collective dimension of being. We are the recipients of it. So the challenge of our rhetoric is to help design this position of reception. Jacobson's functionality, we know the functions of discourse. We know about sender, but receiver, right? Our rhetorics are more from the position of sender now. We need to think about the rhetoric of receiving, reception, the conative position. So learn how to listen to the world, specifically listen to the artificial world, listen to and become, if you like, this is a little corny, but disaster whisperers. That's possible. So we got a wonderful disaster in Gainesville, Florida. And part of the template here is like, when I'm talking about my situation, I want you to be thinking about your situation. Like how, because we're talking about global, local. It's sort of global. We have global disasters. So, Gainesville, Florida, we have a Superfund site. Superfund created in 1980 in response to the first one, which was Love Canal in Niagara Falls, and a neighborhood had been built on toxic waste dump. A lot of problems, a lot of damage. So we've had a site, Cabot Coppers, was a wood treatment plant there for about 100 years. And they made pine tar. They made pine tar to preserve wood, because wood, especially in our kind of environment, rots. And they developed it to treat railroad ties, utility poles. They made it there about 100 years. And when you cook pine stuff, and you produce, in that cooking, you produce pine tar, that's great. You produce charcoal, that's also great. And then you produce creosote, that's not so great. Dioxin, arsenic, goes into the soil. And now we've known that that's been going on since 1983. They just kept going, they changed their technology a little bit. And what the changing of the technology did was, well, we still had the stuff going in the soil, but then we also had dust particulate being picked up and going into the nearby neighborhoods, particular neighborhood called Stephen Foster neighborhood next to it. So that also got a different kind of pollution. And so the thing to think about here is that we've known about this since the 1980s. They finally closed it down a couple years ago. There have been a lot of court negotiations and so forth. We're in remediation now, supposedly, and we have 5 years before the water flow carrying the dioxin and the arsenic hits the Murphy is the correct word, but it's got polarizing the Murphy, hits the Murphy well field, and the aquifer is contaminated and unusable in North Central Florida. And that would be a disaster. So there was this part of the community getting organized to finally try to act upon this collective event. There was a community art project sponsored by the community, and they had some funding and so forth. We invited artists in the area to contribute, and the idea was the arts had something to say about this that might help the community reflect upon its own actions. And remember, we're interested in this kind of collective being, this kind of collective dimension of intelligence. Because we know that back in the origins of literacy, you know the story, Socrates went around, he would catch, maybe you signed the dialogue, Euthyphro. Euthyphro is going on his way to accuse his father of impiety, and Socrates stops him and questions him about impiety and asks him to define the terms of what, as we were saying earlier, he can't do it because that's a literate skill. It'd be like stopping me and asking me to program a computer. You have to have a literate kind of intelligence to define it. So basically, Euthyphro, what Socrates showed in his dialogue is that Euthyphro didn't know what he was doing as an individual. And the genius and the brilliance and the power of literacy is we've gotten to the point where individuals, at least literate individuals, kind of know what they're doing. Individuals are pretty smart. Unfortunately, collectively, we're still Euthyphro. So we got the problem of the kind of collective Euthyphro now. How do we get the community to understand that it doesn't know what it's doing and what to do about that? So the Order Research Ensemble is part of this project, this community exhibit of art, kind of help the community reflect on what it's doing. We created this work called Murphy's Wellbeing, and it is an interactive installation. As I say, I'm thinking of it now as my sort of wince, wet, wither project. And what I want to do is I'm going to show a couple video clips that will give you an idea. First, a very short one that just shows what this thing is, an interactive piece, show how it's set up. And then a trailer that was made to communicate about the piece. And then I'll show that, and then I'll talk more about why we designed it or the way we did. So let's see if I can make this thing work. Yes. Good.
Wellbeing is an installation composed of 2 synchronized video projections and an interactive multi-touch table that allows participants the ability to investigate and navigate the Cabot Copper's Superfund site and adjacent surroundings. The interactive surface uses the diffused surface illumination method to respond to presses on the screen. For example, homes in the adjacent Stephen Foster neighborhood function as buttons. The viewer presses a home, thus triggering playback of contextual related video projected on the nearby walls. The projection on the left will be an interview with an occupant from the home, and the projection on the right will be a video programmatically selected from one of the pop cycle categories previously enumerated.
Now the
Consult, a genre for community deliberation on a Superfund emergency. There is a disturbance in the wellness field of North Central Florida. There is an appeal, a call from our neighborhoods, and for one neighborhood in particular, named for the songwriter Stephen Foster. It is a test of responsibility. What is that feeling? Is it obligation? The stickiness of pine tar is an allegory of what bonds us with our neighbors. How can the Stephen Foster neighborhood serve as a fable about the wellness of America? First, because Stephen Foster is acclaimed as the father of American music. Composing Old Folks at Home for a blackface troupe in 1851, Foster needed a name for the river referred to in the lyrics. Foster never visited the South, but he found the name Swanee in a dictionary. A version of the song bowdlerized to remove reminders of the slavery institutionalized in the antebellum South is now the state song in Florida. Stephen Foster imagined our plantation as an image of happiness, if only it was as easy to purify our water as it is to clean up history. Who else imagined our happiness? Samuel Taylor Coleridge in Kubla Khan, one of the greatest poems of the Romantic imagination, invented a composite city called Xanadu. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree. Coleridge based his description of the pleasure dome mostly on Bartram's Travels, published in the late 18th century, in which Bartram described the karst topography of north central Florida. 4 sites are composited in Xanadu: Chengdu, Kubla Khan's capital city, the mountains of Kashmir, the caves of Abyssinia, and the sinkholes and underground river of Alachua County. In other words, what happens to us is happening in Xanadu. Xanadu is polluted, and the old folks at home testify to the disaster. The Florida Research Ensemble produced Murphy's Wellbeing to help us understand our fix. Other consultants informed the community about engineering options or corporate calculations of cost-benefit outcomes. The Murr Agency consultants add the insights of arts and letters expertise, concerned with a measure of well-being which, we know, is priceless. The testimony of our neighbors is a call not just to duty, but to Xanadu. The Well of Stories is a database Xanadu, a potential fable to remind us that the local is global. As Xanaduans, we live in 4 places simultaneously: Alachua County, India, Hollywood, and Utopia. 4 forces shape our destiny, recorded in 4 subplots, the first of which consists of the testimonies of neighbors reporting from the disaster zone. The second track is the history of pine tar. It is the story of corporations going back to the discovery of America by Europeans trying to get to India to trade in pepper and other spices. They treated the hulls of their ships with pine tar. The third subplot is our mythology, dramatized in Hollywood tales of superheroes that express our belief in the capacity of individuals to change the world. The fourth subplot is philosophy, the voice of wisdom, explaining our ideals about well-being, about how the world should be. If the story of Murphy's Wellbeing is a fable of Xanadu, its moral remains to be constructed by interacting with the well. What is our answer to the ancient question, how should we live? The well is an archive of narrative tracks to be explored in basic montage units, a collective fable composed 1 ideogram at a time. The fable emerges by juxtaposing neighbors' testimonies with passages from the other's enemy places. You consult with the well by selecting neighbors and relating them to one or more of the subplots shaping their world. History, mythology, philosophy. The inventors of cinema learned from ancient ideograms how to express thought by means of images. An ideogram combines two sensory properties to evoke an immaterial thought. The Chinese character for happiness combines the figure of music, a hand striking a drum, with singing, an open mouth. Happiness is a feeling like that expressed in a song such as Old Folks at Home, Way Down Upon the Murphy Wells Field. How do these ideograms make you feel? A clue to the moral of the fable is in the very name of Murphy's Well Field, since the Murphy game is a classic confidence trick, a bait-and-switch scam native to American folk culture. We wanted pepper and got poison. If you used pepper today, you helped pollute Xanadu. The pine tar commodity produced at the Cabot Copper's site is a kind of tar baby, like the one created by Briar Fox and Briar Bear to catch Briar Rabbit, and the fables adapted to cinema in Walt Disney's Song of the South. But is that really our song? Our South? There's a note of optimism in these stories, since the trickster rabbit always extricated himself from the fix. Let us hope that is also our story.
Okay, so let me say a little bit about the fable that they're trying to construct there. So the idea is the citizens come in, and there's been a lot of information now recently in the newspapers, and there's been organizing committees from the Stephen Foster neighborhood, and of course there's developers and everything. You understand, and this neighborhood is right in the city limits of Gainesville, so it's like, you know, the actual polluted part is about 1 acre. It's like a 9-acre site, I forget the exact size, but about an acre that's really seriously polluted. It's very, very seriously polluted. So the whole community has a lot of stake. The question is trying to decide what's going on. Part of the issue is that, you know, it has to do with individualism we were talking about earlier, so everybody kind of thinks, oh, well, this is kind of a one-off deal, like it just happened to happen here in Gainesville, but, you know, things are fine everywhere else. But actually, there's 1,300 Superfund sites in the United States, 68 in Florida. So it's kind of business as usual. You know, this is kind of, we're trying to get this larger picture, but the ambition of the well is to call it a consult. And the idea is consulting beyond conventional consulting. So the idea is, okay, conventional consulting, do your best. You know, you can empirically, and indeed the Corps of Engineers, they've done a big study, and they figured out how they can stop the pollutant from reaching the aquifer. And I actually want to show this image. you might recognize that's Satan in ninth circle of hell, and he's been immobilized in ice. He's been frozen there. This is exactly the solution that the engineers have for this pollution, because the idea is that, you know, you've got the rainfall and everything and washing down into the aquifer, carrying the dioxin, carrying the arsenic and so on towards the well field. And the solution is that it's experimental. They've had it for 10 or 15 years now. And you put a chemical, you know, you pile up all the polluted soil. To remove it, I guess, is too expensive. So you pile it all up in one spot. You sort of make a kind of a dome there. You cap the dome so that there isn't any more seepage from the rain. And then you inject chemical into the soil, and it freezes the pollutant in its spot, and it won't go any further. Now this is cool, because that's just exactly the solution God had for Satan too. Okay, so like, you already knew, you know, you just had to get the technology to do it. But Dante is relevant here because part of what we're saying is, you know, my theme all along has been that you know, the theme has been that we in the humanities, the arts, have something to offer. You know, the STEM disciplines, the engineers and so forth, okay, they figured out how to fix the pollutant. Maybe our drinking water won't be polluted in 5 years. Hope they're right. But meanwhile, we got the larger problem, which is to say, why, as a community, do we keep doing this? What, you know, the sort of collective euthyphro problems, like, you know, how come is it that we keep polluting our own nest? And, you know, how is there a way for us to think collectively and understand our situation, if you like? And so here, kind of think, well, so what we need is the equivalent. So we have GPS technologies. And again, I keep referring to STEM disciplines because they're the ones that are getting all the money, and everybody says, yeah, STEM discipline. So we have GPS technology. This is terrific for one dimension of our situation, which is the physical location. Like, you can put a pinpoint. You know exactly where the Cabot Copper site is. You know exactly where Murphy's Wellfield is and so forth. And you can GPS it. You can go there and everything. But what we need is EPS, existential positioning system, because there's this larger situation that we're in. Now, previous epochs, the pre-modern epoch, whatever its narrow limitations and so forth, had an EPS system. That is to say, it had an allegory system. You know, this will be familiar to you. You know that you've studied this. Dante's Comedian is like supposedly the apotheosis, the culmination, the best example of this allegorical system. It's an allegorical system. As I say, the pre-modern world, the Judeo-Christian, Greco-Roman, pre-modern world, and there was a sort of typological situation. So the believer knew where exactly he or she was in the metaphysical world. You knew your place, you knew your position, you knew what was going to happen. So the literal level was the Old Testament, story of coming out of Egypt. And the allegorical story was the New Testament. It turns out the New Testament, the life of Christ for resurrection, is in the life of an individual, the coming out of Egypt. This is two stories typologically repeat one another, create this very powerful pattern. The individual believer then says, what would Jesus do? I mean, they model their own life on the life of Christ in order to understand their own life and death in this larger picture. And then there's the anagogical level, the world historical level, which is to say the world is moving through towards the end of time when there will be a last judgment, and that will be the end of the world. So this is an EPS system. It's an existential positioning system. People knew where they were. And of course, in modernity, this completely collapses. And as this particular explanation collapses, but what our philosophers have taught us is that each epoch does not simply wipe away the previous epoch and start over, but there is this phenomenon of reoccupation. This is Hans Guggenberg's idea. Hans Guggenberg wrote in the most authoritative book on secularization, coming into modernity. He says secularization, what it does is it keeps all the questions from the theological era, but just throws out the answers. Gives you a new set of answers, keeps the questions. So, because the questions are still there, whence, whither, whence, what, whither. So, what I'm suggesting in terms of the rhetoric of the consult, and Barry had mentioned, but this is the My Street, that there's a pop cycle, and you and I are in this pop cycle. You and I are in this allegorical EPS system, but it's just that it's been flipped. And the anagogy actually doesn't come from this Christian syncretic worldview, but rather as a different organization. So this is the way I like to think about it. This is what we were trying to teach. So what the consult as a consulting rhetoric, as we're saying to the community, if you experience this well, if you interact with this well in the way that it was depicted there in the video, you're going to have an EPS experience. You're going to see, you're going to undergo the position of yourself here in Gainesville, Florida, Alachua County. But the way it works, the structure of this is that you have your own family story, your own immediate situation. This would be, the family, this would be a person in the Stephen Foster neighborhood. We had one of the people I was working with, Barbara Jodell, went in the Stephen Foster neighborhood and other related areas, and she interviewed people. She got 60 hours of video interviews in this archive. We took those, chopped them up into little 2-minute clips. And there's 2 or 3 hours of those little 2-minute clips in the database of the well. So you have your own family story, and particularly Stephen Foster, whatever, and you can think about that in your own case, memories and so on. Another dimension is the entertainment story. So, but instead of the life of Christ, it's now the entertainment story. So we don't model ourselves on the story of Jesus in our EPS system. Individuals may, that's their choice. But most of us, we have this sort of pop mythology that shows us what we believe about how the world works. From our stars, from our celebrities, whether that's American Sniper or whether it's, Sleepless in Seattle, or whatever our story is. But basically, the story, and especially the story in the context of the disasters, we believe that an individual agent taking action will solve the problem. That's how so Aaron Brockovich is sort of our mythology. It's like Aaron, where's Gainesville's Aaron Brockovich? That's all we need. Or like as the NRA says, our frontier myth is a good man with a gun. The right man, good man with a gun, solve your problems. Bring the hero in. That's our model of agency. So we believe that. And in the well, you would have such stories also. But now here's the kicker, is community history, story of history. Now, and the idea is that, we are in a larger historical community. Everything in all of these stories, whether it's our family, our mythology, even our career, we're now saying the anagogical dimension comes from our career. So if you're a dentist, or if you're a philosopher, or if you're whatever your career might be, that's the one that gives you your account of how the world works, and also is a source of problem solving, at least in your area of responsibility. The big one that's hard to grasp and hard to understand is history. In fact, Heidegger, one of the great philosophers that certainly influenced on my work and everything, is Heidegger. He shifted from his early work when he was concerned about individual being, which was Dasein, to this other thing called Ereignis, which was event, which is collective being. He was trying to understand how we could get at this dimension of Ereignis, because the problem is that when the community makes a decision, supposedly, certainly when an individual makes a decision about what to do, you have good judgment or not, you're basically dealing with a condition or situation in which 98% of decisions already been made for you. So in Gainesville, Florida, when we're facing the Superfund site, it's not like, well, maybe we shouldn't develop pine tar here in Alachua County. It's like, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And this is why some of our theorists tell us, like, forget Prometheus. We are not Promethean, we are Epimetheus. And remember, Epimetheus was the brother of Prometheus, and Epimetheus only understood things retrospectively. Prometheus said to him, look, I had a little deal, I had a little tip with the gods. They're going to be coming around. They're going to be trying to trick you. If a very beautiful woman comes to the door and tries to sell you a jar, don't let her in. So Pandora shows up, and the rest is history, right? Prometheus, yeah, Pandora, cool. I can't believe you're into me. So we understand retrospectively, but listen how difficult this is. So the story of pine tar, part of what we were trying to put into that story is and the community understands it up to a point. That is, they know it's actually, they have this brochure they put out. So pine tar was discovered in it was first developed in 1716 in the state of North Carolina. That's what they call tar heels. Developed this technology to preserve wood. That's sort of where their story starts and going from there. But so then we ask the question, well, okay, why did they really need to preserve wood? And you look into the history, and as it sort of mentioned there and went by pretty fast in the video, the big problem was ship hulls. Ship hulls had been going into the warmer waters, European ships going into the warmer waters, and they encountered shipworms, and you can imagine what a big trading vessel would cost. That's like a skyscraper today or something. And in 6 months, a shipworm would eat right through the hull of that super expensive ship. So they needed to preserve the wood. And they had figured out pine tar technology. They had understood that, and then they'd been getting their pine from Russia and from Scandinavian countries. War between Russia and Finland, whatever. They couldn't get it there anymore. They had all this pine in the colonies, so they started developing pine tar production in the colonies, especially in the South, Carolinas, Florida. But so the key is, why were the ships going into the warmer waters? Well, it was because they were the trade routes were going to India to get spice, specifically to get pepper. In fact, I want to show you, I brought with me a little bag of pepper. Maybe you should pass it around. But what you're looking at there is the end of the world right there. And in the old days, that would be worth, $100 million. The Romans controlled the trade route. It was a weed in India. They, cultivated it. People love the taste. Now here's the key thing I want to think about. People love the taste of pepper. And everybody loved it. And the Romans controlled those routes for a while. In fact, the Romans were able to hold off the Visigoths and the Huns from invading Rome for about 100 years by taking caravans full of pepper up to the border and trading it off. And the Huns would leave them alone. It was so valuable, so desirable. So we know the story. Portuguese had the routes around Africa. The Spanish want to get in on it. They get Columbus. They go west. He runs into India. Oops, except it's North America. Why are the Native Americans called Indians? Yeah, he thought he was Indian. He was trying to get to India because they wanted pepper. And ladies and gentlemen, so we were willing to commit genocide on the native peoples in order to get the pepper. And I don't want to make, so wasn't that stupid? No, this is the thing we want to get at. There's a reason why, in terms of the beginning of electricity, that the philosopher is considered the first philosopher of electricity is Immanuel Kant. And he promoted aesthetic taste to the same level of intellectual virtue as reason, pure reason, and political choice, ethics. So Aristotle had said, well, there's two intellectual virtues, which is, understanding, necessity, reason, and then, practical reason, which is ethics and politics, where human choice is included. And then there's techne, poiesis, that's lesser, it's there, lesser. So we get to Kant, and he promotes this dimension of poiesis, we call it aesthetic taste, promotes it to the same status as the other two dimensions. And of course, we know why that's so important. See if we can find my so if we're looking at we're thinking about what the well is doing. Turns out that that the three intellectual virtues, we're saying three capabilities and three powers of human intelligence identified since classical Greeks, continuing on through today, we're saying is theoria, theory, reason, reasoning, and praxis, action, political, ethical choice, and then beauty, pleasure, attraction, repulsion, that Kant addresses in judgment of taste. And what's happened through the tradition is these three have always been quarreling. And the assumption was always, well, these three can't get along. One is better than the other. Philosophy knows what should be. History has the facts of what is, what was. And then, aesthetics, poiesis has imagination of what could be. And somehow it's like one is truer than the other, and you say which one is truer. Or we have the story of the Judgment of Paris, where Paris is supposed to choose, again, the gods have set up a trap here, which one is more beautiful? Athena, Hera, or Aphrodite? And they take a mortal, Paris, and he's allowed to choose and award the golden apple to one of these people who recognize, Athena, well, that's wisdom, that's knowledge. Hera, that's political power, praxis. Aphrodite, that's sensory, sensual pleasure. And it's always a challenge for artists to and this has been a hugely much portrayed scene since classical times. Hubert Damisch has written a beautiful book called The Judgment of Paris, all about the history of this painting and this image, this topos. But of course, all the figures of women that are portrayed in these images, they all look alike. How do you visualize praxis? Like, how do you visualize wisdom? They're all like three good-looking babes, I don't know. And Aphrodite wins because she promises Paris, each one tries to bribe power, knowledge, or satisfaction. Paris takes satisfaction. She bribes him with Helen, the most beautiful, most attractive woman alive in the world, and he takes her away from Agamemnon. We know the rest. Right, the war, the Trojan War, and the fall of Troy, and all of that. It's like disaster. If you choose taste, you're doomed. But we do choose taste. And so part of the thing here is we have to say what we're finally facing up to in the lecture scene. This is sort of the point I want to leave you with, so we can shift to a conversation about this. Because the challenge is that what we've been handed in electricity is this idea of saying theopraxesis, I call it. Meaning that, and it turns out that the structure of the whole apparatus history, put them all together, that the challenge is that each apparatus has addressed one of these three powers. We say capability, power, virtue, you all mean the same. same thing. That, that each one, so we say, well, orality took this idea of right, wrong, what action, what's the right or wrong action, in the context of religion. Literacy took true or false, took science, took wisdom, took Athena, whatever. And now we're saying what's left is we have to finally face up to and overcome this repression, suppression, repulsion, distaste for addressing our incorporated corporeal sensory being as bodies. And the fact that we will do anything to get a pound of pepper. That libido, if you want to call it that power of our bodies to experience the heat of pepper will move nations, will move historical forces at a global level. That's the cause. It's like, that peppers, that's the atomic energy of human desire. It's that libido energy of people desiring and acting upon those desires is the force of electricity that has to be reckoned with and is being reckoned with. Corporations are doing this. This is what corporations are interested in. They are interested in attraction and repulsion. That's their responsibility. They are not interested in right and wrong. That's for science. They're not doing science. They're not doing religion. They're not doing true false. They're not doing science. They're not doing religion. That's being done. It's going to continue to be done. There's this new dimension that's being addressed by the corporation. Its rhetoric's being invented in the entertainment corporation. We need to get in on that. We need to help develop the rhetoric, the logic, the practices to help people address this dimension of what we love and what we hate, this desire for pepper. And we've got the tools to do it in our traditions, but the challenge, it hasn't been invented yet. I'm working on that, but I'm old. I'm tired, and I got some steaks on the grill. So we're going to have to turn it over to you, take it up in your own local case, but with global implications for sure. So, thank you. We have time for questions, maybe, or?
I saw Creole down there and I thought of seasoning.
That's right. I want my pepper back then. It costs $7. It costs $7 now. And you go in the supermarket and you see racks of spice. Maybe you read the history of spice, Shibboleth or whatever. I mean, it's like, man, worlds removed, civilization removed, just so we could, so we can do that. Yep.
Yeah. Locally, we have like the Environmental Protection Agency here, headquartered in Orlando, and we also have the St. John's River Water Management District, which regulates water usage and so forth. I was wondering if maybe say a little bit more about the official response to the environmental situation there in Gainesville, the costs and so forth, and why maybe more specifically why they can't use another method of dealing with that contaminated soil as opposed to the one method.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question because I think part of the local activists, for example, did not want to settle on this remediation deal because, like I said, you got two conditions, two pollutions going on. One is I think the more serious is the soil's being polluted, so it's heading towards a well field and it's going to make the water unusable for everybody. In Hale Plantation, which is a rich part of town, or Steve Foster, which is not so rich, or whatever, it's like, nobody's going to be able to drink the water. So you're going to have to truck it in, you're going to have to build some sort of water processing, that's going to cost $1 billion, a lot more. Right, so that's a big issue. The activists in Stephen Foster wanted their neighborhood cleaned up. This has been done in certain other neighborhoods, meaning that they wanted, and the way it worked out with the corporation is that Cabot Coppers sold it to a holding company, Beezer Corporation. And I just wanted to show you this map too on answering that question. So when you look into Cabot coppers, especially Cabot specifically, you Google them, you'll see that they are involved in lawsuits all over the world. There are people suing them everywhere. Now, what are they doing wrong? What they're doing is, we want pepper. That is, we want the kind of, weird metals and stuff that go into these iPhones and so forth. So they're getting them for us. And in doing it, they're polluting the world. They're creating disaster environments. So, like, this is a map. There's 1,300 sites. This map, like, nobody. There's 10 regions in the 10 regions. We're in region 4. We're in region 4 and so forth. So what's difficult for the community to grasp it holistically is to say that business, so corporations are in business, and the business is that they will do whatever they have to do to deliver to us the products that we want and that we buy, and then they're willing to accept the consequences, so up to a point. So for example, in Gainesville, Florida, there's no Aaron Brockovich, because the corporation said, whoa, we polluted the crap out of this place. They sold it to their holding company, Beazer. Beazer's job is to go in and remediate these things at a cost-benefit ratio. So, and they figured the cost-benefit, I think they figured it at, I don't know, $200 million. So it's like, let's spend $200 million, and for $200 million, we can, in the Stephen Foster neighborhood, we can take the foot of the topsoil off and replace that as best we can do. We're not buying out your houses, moving to the Hale Plantation. That's what they wanted, activists. We do that, and we're going to do this freeze-o thing. We think it'll work. Maybe it'll work. I don't know, experimental. And but we're not going to dig out however many acres of pollution and move it to China or something. We're not going to do that. That's way too expensive. So if it's $200 million, if you don't want that, fine. We'll go bankrupt because that's Beazer's job. We do it. We go bankrupt. They start another one. But so the thing we're trying to get at is to say, and the motto of the emergency is problems be us. So the reason why Beazer and the reason why Cabot is doing this stuff is us. We want pepper. We need to commit genocide. Fine. We're going to do it. So there's the official program, but this is a policy choice. Right? It's a policy choice. Cost-benefit ratio, and at a certain point, they're just daring you to, turn it down because like, crap. So if we don't do this stupid Satan in the frozen thing, then what? So we're really, so we're at a point. So here's where this is actually didn't get this. So here's my concluding point. Is my analogy here is always, it's not my concluding point in general, but it's this point here is. I think it was John Cage that said this, or some wise person said this, but it's like, what's the difference between a dialect and a language? The difference between a dialect and a language is that a language is a dialect with an army. So the reason why the Spanish speak Castilian and not Catalonian, because Castile had a big honking army, Ferdinand, Isabel, and all that. Catalonia didn't. So there's this political dimension that's emerging. Now the problem, and as you know this, like when you do focus groups and so forth, and people, they say, well, would you rather have railroad ties that, don't rot right away, or would you rather have drinking water? People with drinking water. They make the right choice, but then they say, oh, well, that'll cost a lot more, and so forth. Oh, never mind then. So what's needed is, and what is emerging, and this is what the theory is saying, we can see evidence of it. So what's emerging in electricity, as we could predict, is a new political entity, new experience of personhood beyond self, and a new kind of collective identity that I mentioned at the beginning. So the consult is for a collective Euthyphro. You've got to make Euthyphro smart. And it's kind of like with artificial intelligence, it's slow going. So you might remember that Descartes, it said, he was practicing doubt. So he believes that God underwrites truth, but he said, what if God were an evil deceiver? So that he had made human beings in a way to amuse himself. So that our foot would be sitting around the fire, and our foot would be in the fire, be burning out, and we would know that something was wrong. We'd have to go through a checklist. And by the time we got to our foot, it had burned off, and it got us going. It's so funny. No. Well, and if you want to know what that world would be like, read Sam Beckett, because Beckett's novels are all like, what if that was true? You know, that's what his characters are like that. Well, you remember in computer science that the problem of artificial intelligence, so let's say you're dealing with artificial intelligence, you're talking about George Washington, and you want to say that George Washington is in Washington, D.C., and his foot's in the fire. The computer doesn't know that his foot's in Washington, D.C., too. Like, how does it know that George Washington is in Washington, D.C., so is his foot? Oh, man, you know that. You know. So what we got to do is our collective euthyphro has to know that his foot is in the fire. We're going to know that when I am, using my utility pole, that this is happening. One of the videos I wanted to make, I didn't make it, was I was going to get all upset about coppers and everything, and I was going to follow the utility poles, which were sold up until about 3 or 4 years ago. I was going to follow who was using this utility pole. I was going to follow it. God was going to bang on the door, and then of course cut, and then I answer the door. What do you want? You're using those utility poles that are polluted, Alachua County. No, I didn't. Well, I didn't do that. I don't know. It's like because we're, to try to get this idea that I am the one, you are the one that's, creating this situation collectively. But so the answer is, so we're saying, how do we get corporations to do the right thing? Because they just want to make money. Like Beezer, like cut your loss, $200 million, sure, that's worth it. And the answer is, you got to have an army. You got to hold people to well-being as a criterion. So not only right and wrong, not only true and false, but also pleasure and pain, joy and despair. That consideration has to be taken into account. This is what Anonymous is about. This is what Occupy is about. This is what Snowden is about. Is to say, corporations, we're going to cost you some serious money if you don't match up. We're going to take down your computers, and we're going to, that's what it's about. Not that they, there's a hacker thing. It's all about, rebellion or anarchy or whatever. But the larger picture here is that there has to be a force, and we're calling this is what the Fifth Estate is about. It's an emerging global political power, potential power, that will take well-being as an issue at the table, along with nation states, along with corporations, along with religions, and it will be able to enforce this consideration. Because otherwise, it isn't that people don't know, it isn't that people don't want well-being, it's just that there's nobody there to hold people to account for it.
Okay. Well, one question is, if well-being can be pleasurable in some ways, how does that compete with the pleasures that are sold to us that seem so immediate?
That's a good question because to say that we have to. So we're thinking about where I think apparatus is useful is to say that each apparatus, morality, literacy, electracy, has a different metaphysics. So meaning that its understanding of the world is incommensurable one with the other. So we're in a situation, I sort of made a joke about this, but actually it's coming true, but the theory predicted it. So we're in a situation where we have a creationist who's being a Senate, is now going to be in charge of NASA. And so sort of, this was supposed to be funny, but the idea was painful a little bit, but the idea is, what if NASA had got a huge budget in a creationist political administration, and they spent it on designing a rocket ship to go to heaven? Can't get to heaven in a rocket ship. There's not a place like that. What? You can't? No, I think so. You know, it's like, you're taking incommensurable metaphysics. And so what happened in electricity, so we sort of got it wrong. I've got to think, all right, think about what's the equivalent of that for actual possibility. In terms of electricity, so we say, well, what was the first understanding, and why were the traditions in the past so hostile to attraction repulsion, so hostile to human pleasure? Because you know, in our stories, in our mythologies, you probably know, and this goes back to Christian times, but most recently, you know, movies by Ben Bender and so forth. But angels envy humanity for our sensory pleasure. Maybe you saw the movie Michael, John Travolta. He's come back to sort of help one last more sap his life back together. And like he eats sugar, you know, I don't know, he's like pours a whole bowl of sugar on the cereal and he smokes constantly, and of course a lot of parties and stuff is like, oh, humans, you know, like this, or like in a more austere philosophical vein, the angel comes down to earth and momentarily is embodied and makes foot tracks in the snow, just as ecstatic. Foot tracks in the snow. Like, this is like the power of having a, because angels don't have bodies. The last person you want to ask about sin is an angel. I don't know, because they don't have bodies. Like, yeah, I have no clue, dude. I mean, I don't know why you're like that person. It's all theological. But you know, so the problem of attraction repulsion, you know, for the corporation is a misunderstanding at first. So what is the actual site of the invention of electricity? Keep this in mind. Our equivalent of the academy in Athens is Montmartre in Paris in the 19th century. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that the response of the Germans to getting beat by the French in the Napoleonic Wars was they founded the first modern university, and Johns Hopkins University of America was modeled on it, and then sort of went from there. What was the French response to the Franco-Prussian War? Because in the, you know, Prussians got back at them, 1870s, another war, Prussians totally demolished the French in short order. What was the French response? And actually, it's quite amazing, because once again the French lost Alsace and so forth. And so the Alsatian French came to Paris, and they went up to Montmartre. Now Montmartre was in the outskirts of Paris, and it was a red light district. Outside the city limits, they had these dive cheap wine, gambling, loose women, parties and so on and so forth. And the avant-garde, and what these Alsatians did, and they started these clubs, and they started these cabarets, and the cabaret scene was the French response to getting beat in the Franco-Prussian War. They didn't start another university, they started Las Vegas. And basically, this is what Montmartre, but in the cabarets of Montmartre, which were entertainment dives, addressing all the vices, they invented modernism. And modernism is the logic of electricity. Dadaism, we want in short, Dadaism, the Baxter machine, that is our propositional logic. That's our topical logic. That's what it is. It's already been invented. We got to start teaching it though. So the cabaret is the academy. Now, how do you generalize from the cabaret? Cabaret Voltaire. You know, that's it. It's like, where's the next best thing? No, it's already been invented in pure form, just like Aristotle invented, you know, propositional logic in pure form. Following 1,000 years, worked out how to use it in teaching topics and so on. So a little misunderstanding. So I'm saying Las Vegas is entailed by the Montmartre Cabaret. And you think about Las Vegas. So Las Vegas is cabaret made family friendly. Bring your kids and lose your fortune, and like play the slots and see the show and the party girls. And like But that seems to be lame. I mean, like, that's sort of like a misunderstanding. It's kind of a literalization. Oh, so I guess everybody wants wine, women, and song. Yes. Gambling and all the vices. No, that's not it. It's the right idea, though. We want to legitimate sensory, bodily pleasure, but it has to be put into a metaphysics. It has to be put into a practice, a worldview of well-being. But when you create always think about these principles. You know, any conceptual structures and oppositional structures, adaptive structures. So well-being is paired with disaster. So it's well-being against disaster. But the other side of well-being is disaster. So the people that wanted pepper, or the people that want pot, people that want anything like that, they don't want to kill a bunch of border guards. They don't want to. You remember those ads a while back? We had a little middle school kid says, "Yeah, I killed 5 border guards today." And the fellow said, "How did you do that?" Well, he didn't do it personally, but the dealer that was the dealer of the guy that he bought it from on the street, that person killed the 5 border guards. You know, you're in this chain, this seriality experience, this holistic condition. And so we got to know that our left foot is in the fire. We don't seem to, it's like, we don't want to be, you know, the Epimethean retrospective, oh, my foot burned off. Should I have known? Yeah. So, is that an answer?
That's an answer. All right. So we're a little bit over time. I did want to remind people that we're having dinner tonight at Eco's. I reserved 24 places, so yeah, I think most of you want to go. About a half-hour drive, so.
Another round of applause for Stay tuned to your email for our next guest. Thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
They keep bugging me on the phone, like,
Very drawn out
nobody did. Never put me well, so the guy.
and it was on the same day.
Which I think is actually just fine.
Oh, I know. I bet. Oh, I'm
well because we have really hard to assess how many people
so it's extremely relevant.
what can they are they enough the entire thing?
The underlying
yeah, because the thing they're going to build is only like 35, right? Yeah, it's really not big. That's an average thing
big recognition to get active and involved, which I think is really all of the rallies that people have been holding. None of those people are experts on social theory or race or whatever, but they're involved in written word. And electricity is a mode of communication that
I'm back in town. I think I never told the students I was out of town. I worked at all these businesses.
well, like one of the Dr. Ulmer talked about touch screen. So video that images sound interview every aspect what elections does. Using these ways. Well, I think one of the things.
Yes, and I talked to my friend about that. I'm going to get a contact with Bill. So you can talk to you. Yeah.
Good. Good. I don't get you out often. It's all your values. And we're moving into the
Figure out how our class runs.
what we have learned from.
Gene, how are we?
What we learned from books. No. All right, thank you.
Now you think.
It felt like the Orange County has reached out.